Stop buying expensive garden fertilizers. I almost destroyed my backyard soil doing exactly what the top gardening videos on YouTube told me to do, until my chickens accidentally fixed everything I had broken. And I don't mean they helped a little. I mean the difference between my soil before and after was so dramatic that my neighbor came over and asked me what chemical I was using. The answer shocked her. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how backyard chickens, managed the right way, can replace your tiller, eliminate most of your pest pressure, and build the kind of dark, living soil that plants grow explosively in. But I'm also going to tell you the 3 things most people do wrong that turn this whole system into a disaster. Let's start with the real problem. Most backyard gardeners are working with soil that is already damaged, and they don't know it. Not because they're bad gardeners, because the advice they followed was genuinely harmful. Here's what happens. You read that your soil needs nitrogen. You go buy a bag of synthetic fertilizer. You apply it, your plants perk up for a week, and you think the problem is solved. What you didn't see, what's invisible to the naked eye, is that you just scorched the mycorrhizal fungal networks living in that soil. These fungal threads connect your plant roots to nutrients and water sources up to 10 times further than the roots can reach on their own. Synthetic salt-based fertilizers don't feed those networks. They destroy them. So now you're in a cycle. Your soil biology gets weaker every season. Your plants become more dependent on the fertilizer you keep buying. And the company selling you that fertilizer is perfectly happy about that arrangement. Some people hear this and switch to raw chicken manure as a natural alternative. And this is where the second mistake happens, one that can actually make your plants sick. Fresh chicken manure is extremely high in ammonia nitrogen. When you apply it directly to an active garden bed, that ammonia concentration burns plant roots, a process called nitrogen burn. It's the same reason you can't use human urine straight on plants. Too concentrated, too hot. Beyond that, fresh manure from any poultry carries a real pathogen risk, particularly salmonella, which is why the USDA National Organic Program requires a minimum of 90 to 120 days of composting before raw manure can be used on crops that contact the soil. Most YouTube videos skip that detail entirely. So if raw manure is dangerous and synthetic fertilizer is destructive, what does the right system actually look like? This is where the chickens come in, not as pets wandering freely through your garden, as a controlled biological tool. The method is called rotational chicken integration. The concept is simple. You divide your garden space into zones. Chickens work one zone at a time in a contained enclosure for a specific window of time. Then you rotate them out, let that zone rest, and move them to the next. The reason this works comes down to 3 specific things chickens do naturally, and what happens to your soil as a result of each one. The first thing is scratching. A chicken scratches at the soil surface constantly and instinctively. It's how they search for insects and seeds. What that scratching does physically is break up surface compaction, aerate the top 2 to 3 inches of soil, and mix organic matter like leaf litter and grass clippings down into the upper soil layer. And here's the key distinction. It only aerates the very top layer. Unlike a mechanical tiller, which goes 6 to 12 inches deep and physically shreds the fungal networks we talked about earlier, chickens scratch just the surface. The biology below stays intact. The second thing chickens do is deposit manure. But here, the rotational system changes everything. Because when chickens drop manure across a zone over 2 to 3 weeks, and then you remove them and let that zone sit, what happens is natural composting in place. The manure gets scratched into the top layer of soil, mixed with the organic matter already there, and begins breaking down before you ever plant anything. By the time that zone rests for the required window, which we'll get specific about, the nitrogen from that manure has converted from volatile ammonia into stable, plant-available forms that roots can actually use without being burned. The third thing chickens do is eat, and what they eat in your garden zone is where the pest control benefit comes from. Chickens actively hunt, and consume soil-dwelling insects at every life stage. Grubs, larvae, pupae, and adult beetles all get picked out of the top few inches of soil as chickens scratch through it. This disrupts the reproductive cycle of common garden pests. Squash bugs, cucumber beetles, and hornworm moths all lay eggs in or near the soil surface, and a single rotation of chickens through a zone can significantly reduce that overwintering population. This means the zone you prepared with chickens in autumn is starting spring with a lower pest pressure than zones that were left alone, without a single spray of pesticide. However, and this is a critical however, the pest control benefit only works if your chickens are removed before transplanting, because the same instinct that makes them excellent pest hunters also makes them a serious threat to your actual vegetable plants. Chickens will eat tomatoes, pull up freshly transplanted seedlings, strip lettuce leaves to the stem, and dig around root systems looking for more insects. They do not distinguish between pest and plant. That's why the rotation window and the timing of removal are the most important variables in this entire system. Let's get specific about timing, because vague advice like rotate your chickens regularly is useless without numbers. The rotation framework I use, and the one that makes biological sense, works in 3 phases for each garden zone. Phase 1 is the chicken work phase. This is when your mobile enclosure sits on an empty or recently harvested bed and your flock scratches, deposits, and pest hunts freely. The target window here is 2 to 3 weeks, not shorter, not much longer. Why 2 to 3 weeks specifically? Shorter than 2 weeks, and the chickens haven't had time to work the soil evenly or deposit meaningful manure volume. Longer than 3 weeks in the same spot, and they begin to compact the surface through repeated foot traffic, and the nitrogen load from concentrated manure in a single spot gets too high. Phase 2 is the manure rest phase. After you remove the chickens, that zone needs to sit without being planted or disturbed. This is where most people get impatient and rush straight to planting, and it's where the root burn issue appears. The rest window I follow for a bed that will grow root contact vegetables, carrots, potatoes, beets, anything that will physically touch soil, is a minimum of 90 days from the last day the chickens were in that zone. This aligns with USDA guidance on manure safety timelines. For crops that grow above the soil surface, tomatoes, peppers, beans, a 45 to 60-day rest is workable. During this rest phase, you can accelerate the breakdown by adding a thin layer of carbon material over the worked zone. Dried leaves, straw, or wood chip mulch. This gives the nitrogen-rich manure a carbon partner, which is what the microorganisms breaking it down actually need. Carbon and nitrogen together, not nitrogen alone. Phase 3 is the plant phase. Once your rest window is complete, this is the bed you plant into. And the results you'll see in that soil versus an untreated bed are why people keep running this system year after year. But this only works if you have enough zones to rotate through. A single garden bed doesn't give you rotation, it gives you a long wait. The minimum practical setup is 3 zones, which lets one zone host chickens, one zone rest, and one zone grow, all simultaneously. 4 zones gives you more flexibility, and if you're building this system from scratch, I'd suggest starting with 3 and expanding from there based on how many birds you're managing. Now let's talk about the physical setup, because you can't just open the garden gate and send your flock in. You need a containment system that moves with your rotation, protects your birds from predators, and keeps them from wandering into beds that aren't ready for them. The most practical tool for this is a chicken tractor, a bottomless mobile enclosure that sits directly on the ground and can be lifted and moved every few days or at the end of your rotation window. No flooring means the birds have direct soil access. No permanent structure means you can reposition it to any zone in your garden. The basic design principles that matter for a functional chicken tractor are enough headroom for your breed, a minimum of about 18 inches for bantam breeds, 24 inches for standard layers. Wire mesh that is tight enough to exclude predators, hardware cloth with a 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch grid is more secure than standard chicken wire, which snakes and small weasels can sometimes get through. A roof covering, either solid or mesh, is not optional. Hawks are active in most regions, and even a covered wire roof provides enough visual deterrent to reduce aerial predator attempts significantly. Some builds use a simple tarp over one section, which also provides shade and weather protection. Weight is the main engineering challenge. A chicken tractor needs to be light enough to move without becoming a significant physical effort every few days, but solid enough that a determined dog or raccoon cannot flip it or push under the edges. The practical solution most experienced keepers settle on is a PVC frame, polyvinyl chloride pipe for the skeleton, covered with hardware cloth and a tarp section. PVC is inexpensive, lightweight, weather-resistant, and doesn't require woodworking skills to assemble. The frame can be built with standard pipe fittings and a hacksaw. The mesh is zip-tied or stapled directly to the frame. Size-wise, a 4 by 8 foot footprint is enough for 2 to 4 birds comfortably for a 2-week rotation on a standard garden bed width. If you're keeping a larger flock, scale up proportionally. The key ratio is enough square footage that birds are actively moving and searching, not standing packed together. And this is where things get interesting from a practical standpoint. You don't need every bird in your flock working the garden. If you have 6 layers, rotating 2 or 3 through the garden while the rest stay in a permanent run is a completely workable system. You're managing the soil impact deliberately, not just letting numbers happen by accident. One more thing about the mobile enclosure that most beginner guides skip entirely. Move it slightly, even just a foot or 2, every 3 to 4 days within the zone it's working. This prevents the overconcentration of manure in a single small footprint and ensures the scratching and nitrogen distribution happens evenly across the full zone area. Let's go deeper than most gardening videos are willing to go. Because understanding what is actually happening in your soil during and after chicken rotation is what keeps you from making the timing mistakes that ruin the results. When a chicken deposits manure directly onto or into the soil surface, the primary active compound is uric acid, the main nitrogen carrier in poultry waste. Unlike mammalian manure, which carries nitrogen mainly as urea, poultry manure's uric acid breaks down more rapidly but also volatilizes more aggressively, meaning it can release as ammonia gas or burn roots if it hasn't had time to mineralize. The soil organisms that drive this conversion, primarily bacteria from the genera Nitrosomonas and Nitrobacter, take the ammonia intermediate and convert it first into nitrites, then into nitrates. Nitrates are what plant roots actually absorb. This is the nitrogen cycle, and it takes time. There is no shortcut. But chicken manure contributes more than nitrogen. Poultry manure is also notably high in phosphorus, typically 2 to 3 times higher in available phosphorus per pound than cattle or horse manure. Phosphorus is the nutrient responsible for root development, flowering, and fruit set. It's why gardens that have been worked by chickens over multiple seasons often show dramatically improved fruit and root vegetable production. And then there's what happens below the surface, the part that takes the longest to develop but produces the most durable results. As nitrogen and phosphorus begin cycling through the soil biology, and as the carbon from the mulch layer you added breaks down alongside, you start building organic matter content. Organic matter is what gives soil its dark color, its sponge-like water retention, its loose, crumbly texture, what experienced gardeners call tilth. Building 1 percentage point of organic matter in your soil takes years through standard composting methods. The combination of biological activity from chicken manure decomposition, physical aeration from scratching, and carbon layering can accelerate that timeline meaningfully. Not overnight, not in one season, but measurably faster than leaving soil to recover on its own. There's also an earthworm effect that most people don't anticipate. As your soil organic matter increases and your soil biology becomes more active, earthworm populations increase in that zone naturally. Earthworms are one of the most powerful soil conditioners in existence. Their castings are one of the most bioavailable forms of plant nutrition, and their tunneling creates drainage channels and oxygen pathways deep into the soil profile. The way you'll know this is working is simple. Pull back a layer of mulch in a zone that's been through 2 or 3 chicken rotations. Count the earthworms per square foot. Compare it to an untreated zone. The difference in most established systems is not subtle. But there's a critical pitfall hiding inside this whole biological process, one that most people only discover after they've already lost a crop. And this is where things get interesting, because the mistake isn't obvious until you understand the nitrogen math. If you overstock your rotation zones, too many birds, too long in too small a space, the nitrogen concentration in that soil doesn't become more fertile, it becomes toxic to plant roots. There's a threshold where available nitrogen in soil goes from beneficial to inhibitory. You can't see it happening. You only see it after you plant and your seedlings yellow, stall, or collapse. The practical safeguard is straightforward. Stick to the 2 to 3 week maximum rotation window. Respect the rest phase. And if you're ever uncertain, do a basic soil nitrogen test before planting. Inexpensive test strips are available at most garden centers and give you a directional reading within a few minutes. Now, if you have a permanent chicken coop with a run, not just a mobile tractor, there's a second system you can run alongside your rotation that produces some of the best compost you'll ever use in your garden. It's called the deep litter method, and it works on the same biological principles, but in a fixed location. The concept is this: instead of cleaning out your coop bedding every week, which is labor-intensive and produces raw manure you then have to manage separately, you build up a deep layer of carbon bedding material over time, allowing the manure to layer into it rather than removing it. As your chickens scratch at this bedding, which they will constantly, because that's what chickens do, they're mixing the fresh manure into the older layers below. The older layers are already in various stages of decomposition. The carbon from the wood shavings or straw is balancing the nitrogen from the manure, and the whole pile is being aerated from above by the scratching motion of the birds. What you're building inside the coop floor is a slow, continuous compost column. By the time you clean it out, typically once or twice a year, the bottom layers have been composting for months and are well on their way to stable, plant-safe material. You still allow it to finish composting in a pile outside before applying it to active garden beds, but you've done most of the heavy biological work passively inside the coop, just by letting the birds do what they naturally do. The key management practice in a deep litter system is the carbon-to-nitrogen ratio. Every time the smell in your coop starts to increase, ammonia smell is the warning sign. You add a fresh layer of carbon, more straw, more wood shavings, more dried leaves. The carbon layer neutralizes the smell, which is really just ammonia off-gassing, and feeds the microorganisms doing the composting work below. The practical depth for a functioning deep litter system is a minimum of 4 to 6 inches of bedding. Some experienced keepers let it build to 12 inches over a full season before cleanout. At that depth, you'll actually notice warmth coming from the floor of the coop in cooler months. That's the microbial activity generating heat as organic matter decomposes. It's the same process happening in the center of a hot compost pile. What you pull out of a well-managed deep litter system after a season is some of the most biologically active, nutrient-dense amendment you can put into your garden. Not raw manure, not synthetic fertilizer, finished biological material that your soil organisms can integrate immediately. However, and I want to be very clear about this, deep litter compost still needs a finishing period outside the coop before it goes on edible crop beds. Pile it, keep it moist, let it sit for an additional 4 to 6 weeks after cleanout. This is your safety margin for pathogen reduction, and it also allows the final nitrogen stabilization to complete before your plants encounter it. Let's talk directly about the advice circulating online that will get you into real trouble if you follow it without thinking it through. Because the gardening internet, for all the good content that exists, also has a significant problem with people repeating things they read somewhere without ever testing whether it's actually safe or accurate. Myth number 1, just let your chickens range freely through your vegetable garden. This is the most common piece of advice shared in backyard farming communities, and it sounds logical on the surface. Chickens eat bugs. Gardens have bugs. Let them loose and let nature handle it. Here is what actually happens. A free-ranging chicken in an active vegetable bed will eat your ripening tomatoes before you do. It will scratch the soil away from shallow root systems. Lettuce, herbs, and young transplants are particularly vulnerable. It will dust bathe in your seedling trays, and it will deposit concentrated manure directly on edible leaf surfaces, which is a food safety issue, not just an inconvenience. Free-ranging works beautifully in an orchard setting, where chickens work under established fruit trees that are too large to be damaged by scratching, and where the fruit hangs high enough to be out of reach. It works in a dedicated cover crop zone. It does not work in an active mixed vegetable garden without serious consequences. Myth number 2, fresh chicken manure is the best fertilizer you can use, just shovel it straight onto your beds. This one comes from a real truth wrapped in a dangerous assumption. Chicken manure is genuinely one of the most nutrient-dense animal amendments available. That part is accurate. The dangerous assumption is that natural equals immediately safe. Fresh poultry manure can carry Salmonella, Campylobacter, and E. coli. These are not hypothetical risks. They are documented pathogens present in commercially raised and backyard flock manure alike. The composting or agging process, with its internal heat buildup and microbial activity, is what eliminates them. Skipping that process and applying raw manure to food crop soil is a genuine food safety risk, particularly for root vegetables and low-growing crops that contact the soil directly. The practical rule: never apply fresh or uncomposted poultry manure to active vegetable beds. Always compost it, either through your deep litter method, a dedicated compost pile, or the in-place rotational rest system, before it contacts soil where food crops are growing. Myth number 3, more chickens means more fertility faster. This feels like it should be true. More birds, more manure, more nitrogen, better soil. But it doesn't work that way in practice. It works the opposite way above a certain threshold. Too many birds in a zone overconcentrates nitrogen beyond what soil microorganisms can process in the rotation window. It also creates compaction. The combined foot traffic of a large flock pressed into a small space begins to compress the surface layer in a way that defeats the aeration benefit you were trying to create. And the vegetation available for foraging gets stripped bare, leaving bare compacted earth that dries out and crusts over. The practical density guideline for mobile rotation use is no more than 4 to 6 standard size laying hens per 32 square feet of zone area per rotation cycle. Bantam breeds can be stocked slightly higher because of their lighter body weight and smaller foot impact. When in doubt, run fewer birds for longer across more zones, not more birds crammed into fewer zones. Myth number 4, you only need to do this once to fix your soil. Some gardening content frames chicken integration as a one-time repair, fix broken soil with one rotation, then go back to your regular methods. That misunderstands what you're building. Soil biology is a living system. It needs ongoing inputs of organic matter, ongoing biological activity, and ongoing disturbance at the right level. Not too much, not too little. One rotation of chickens through a struggling bed can absolutely jumpstart recovery. But maintaining that recovery requires continuing the rotation system, continuing the organic matter layering, and continuing to build the biology year over year. The gardens that look genuinely extraordinary after 5 or 10 years of this system look that way because the system kept running, not because someone fixed it once and walked away. And the next mistake many growers make connects directly to this long-term thinking. It's about what you grow in your rotation zones between chicken cycles, and most people leave this entirely unplanned. Here's the piece of the system that turns a good garden rotation into a genuinely self-sustaining one. When a zone finishes its rest phase and you're not yet ready to plant your main crop, or when a zone transitions out of the growing season, you plant a cover crop into it. Cover crops serve the chicken rotation in 3 specific ways that stack directly on top of everything the rotation is already doing. First, they protect the soil surface. Bare soil loses organic matter to wind and rain erosion, dries out faster, and crusts over. A cover crop holds the surface together and keeps the biology underneath active and moist. Second, legume cover crops, clover, field peas, vetch, and fava beans fix atmospheric nitrogen directly into the soil through a symbiotic relationship with bacteria in their root nodules. This adds a second nitrogen input to your zone that costs you nothing except the price of the seed. Third, and this is the part that connects the loop back to your chickens, a zone planted in cover crop becomes the next chicken forage zone. When you move your flock into a zone covered in living clover or peas, you're giving them a protein-rich food source that supplements their feed, keeps them physically active and engaged, and dramatically reduces your feed costs during the rotation period. The cover crops that work best in a chicken forage rotation are annual ryegrass, crimson clover, Austrian winter peas, and buckwheat. Each of these establishes quickly, provides meaningful forage volume, and terminates cleanly when chickens finish working the zone. They eat it down to the roots, which then decompose into additional organic matter in the soil. When you stack cover cropping inside your rotation timeline, the full system runs like this. Chickens work a zone, zone rests, and cover crop establishes. Chickens return to forage the cover crop, while the biology matures below. Zone rests again briefly, main crop plants go in. You're building fertility from two biological directions simultaneously. The chicken manure cycle from above, the legume nitrogen fixation from the roots below. This is the closed-loop version of the system, and once it's running across 3 or 4 zones simultaneously, you begin to notice something shift in how the garden feels overall. The work required per season starts to decrease. The problems that used to require interventions, pest pressure, nitrogen deficiency, compaction, start to manage themselves. That's what a functioning biological system does. It gets easier over time, not harder. Let me show you what this actually looks like in practice, not in theory, not in diagrams, but in real soil and real plants. Because at the end of the day, the only measurement that matters in a garden is what comes out of it. The first thing you'll notice in a soil that's been through multiple chicken rotations and cover crop cycles is the color. Healthy, biologically active soil is dark, not light brown, not gray, not red clay. Dark brown to almost black in the top few inches. The color comes from humus, the stable, long-chain organic compounds that form as organic matter fully breaks down. Humus holds water, holds nutrients, and provides the structural foundation that roots need to anchor deeply. The second thing you'll notice is water behavior. Pick up a handful of well-developed soil from a rotation zone and squeeze it. It should hold its shape briefly, then crumble apart when you tap it. It should feel slightly moist even hours after the last rain, because the organic matter is holding water like a sponge. Compare that to the behavior of depleted soil, squeeze it, and it either crumbles immediately because it has no structure, or stays compacted in a hard lump because it's mostly clay with nothing binding it together properly. The third visible sign is root depth and structure. Pull a plant from a rotation-prepared bed and look at the root ball. In biologically active soil with good tilth, roots spread wide and go deep. You'll see a dense, expansive root network that filled the available space. Pull a plant from depleted soil and the root ball is compact, shallow, and pale. The plant was working in survival mode, not growth mode. And then there is the harvest itself. This is genuinely difficult to describe without sounding like exaggeration, but experienced growers who shift from conventional soil management to a biological rotation system consistently report the same observations. Fruit size increases, flavor concentration increases, shelf life after harvest increases. These outcomes are connected to nutrient density in the soil, which is connected to biological activity, which is connected to everything the rotation system is building. And beyond the vegetables, there is the egg production connection that often surprises people when they start this system. Chickens that forage actively in cover crop zones, getting access to insects, green plant material, and varied soil organisms, consistently produce eggs with darker, richer yolks than birds raised entirely on commercial feed in a static run. The nutritional profile of the egg reflects the diet of the bird. A bird eating a biologically diverse diet produces a nutritionally richer egg. This is the real payoff of running this system over time. You are not just growing vegetables, you are not just keeping chickens, You are running a small, integrated biological system where each element supports every other element, and the total output is greater than the sum of its parts. The chickens feed the soil feeds the plants feed the chickens, and you collect food from every layer of that loop. So let's bring all of this together into a clear starting point, because the biggest mistake people make after watching a video like this is feeling overwhelmed and doing nothing. This system doesn't require a perfect setup on day one. It requires a starting point. If you already have chickens and a garden, your starting point is this. Identify one bed that is currently empty or recently harvested. Build or move a portable enclosure onto that bed. Run your birds in it for 2 weeks. Then remove them, cover the surface with a thin layer of straw, and let it sit. That is your first rotation. Everything else builds from there. If you don't have chickens yet but you're considering it, the most practical starting flock for a garden rotation system is 3 to 6 laying hens. That number gives you enough birds to work a zone effectively without overstocking it, keeps feed costs and daily management time reasonable, and produces enough eggs to make the flock genuinely useful as a household food source rather than just a garden tool. If you're starting from a point where your soil is severely degraded, heavy clay, compacted subsoil, years of synthetic fertilizer use, don't expect one rotation to reverse years of damage. Expect it to begin the reversal. The first season you'll see modest improvement. The second season, noticeably more. By the third full rotation cycle, the soil you're working with will be fundamentally different from what you started with. Biological systems are slow to break and slow to rebuild, but they are resilient, and once they are running, they compound. The quick summary of everything this video covered: synthetic fertilizer and raw manure both damage soil biology in different ways. Chickens integrated through a structured rotation system aerate soil without destroying fungal networks, deposit nitrogen that becomes plant-safe after proper rest, and eliminate overwintering pest populations without pesticides. The rotation framework runs in 3 phases: chicken work, rest, and composting, plant. The rest window is 90 days minimum for root contact crops and 45 to 60 days for above-ground crops. Deep litter in a permanent coop runs a parallel composting column that produces high-quality garden amendment. Cover crops close the loop, add nitrogen from a second biological pathway, and give your flock a forage source that reduces feed costs. That is the full system, not a shortcut, not a hack. A biological process that works because it works with how soil, plants, and chickens actually function, not against it. Now, if you want to see the exact step-by-step build of the lightweight PVC chicken tractor I use for this rotation system, the one that costs under $50 in materials, takes an afternoon to assemble, and holds up through 2 full growing seasons, that video is right here. I'll show you every cut, every fitting, and every design decision I made after the first version failed. Click right there, and I'll see you in it.